Welcome to Unlocking Your Truth, another podcast by Dr. Lesley Phillips.
Hello everybody, and welcome to Unlocking Your Truth with Dr. Lesley. My name is Dr. Lesley Phillips, and welcome to the show. Now, the focus of the show is everything to do with metaphysics and spirituality. Today's show, I actually have a fabulous guest to introduce you to. Today I have with me Sharron Bassanti, and she is the founder of the School of Gypsy Arts. Welcome to the show, Sharron.
Thanks for having me, Lesley.
It's my absolute pleasure. And so listeners, the reason that I invited Sharron was a couple of reasons. One is we can talk all about the gypsy arts. You know, we've been covering all sorts of different topics as the months have gone by on this show, but we've never talked about things like tarot card reading or Tealeaf reading or palmistry. And I just thought it would just be a lot of fun for us to have a show where that's what we focus on. So, Sharron, my first question to you is, what are the gypsy arts? Did I get it right when I was referring to tarot reading and tea leaf reading, or is there more to it than that?
Yeah, that's a great question, Lesley. You know, a lot of people would associate gypsy with the tarot, the tea leaves, but for me, the gypsy arts is a lot more than that. It's about connecting to your spiritual side, empowering your soul, and connecting with nature, and just allowing yourself to tap into your third eye and listening to what spirit is saying.
Fantastic. And so there's, of course, many ways that you can do that, tap into your spiritual side and your soul and your third eye. And on the show, we talk about the different ways. But in particular, I am interested, even though the gypsy arts, as you say, it's really a broad subject. I would still, I know that you are an expert in tarot reading, and I believe you are an expert in teacup reading as well, and so much more, of course. But it would be great if you could just give us a little bit of information and overview and history about tarot and also about tea leaves and any of the other things that that you have a lot of expertise that would fall under the gypsy arts.
Okay, we'll start with the tarot. The history of the tarot isn't concise, and there is no date. On this date the tarot was invented. So there's a lot of schools of thought out there, and one that I follow or resonate with is that the tarot is made up of 78 cards. 22 are the major arcana, and for those of you that aren't familiar with the tarot, the major arcana is archetypes. They're huge events in your life, and then the other cards are the minor arcana, and they're more day-to-day. So the major arcana is thought to be brought over to Rome by the explorers that went there, and the priests used to play with the cards. And the minor arcana is believed to have more of Northern European origin, so they're just the regular playing deck of cards.
So that's interesting, because I've always heard tell that some people believe that the tarot originated in ancient Egypt.
Yeah, that's one of the origins that people feel that the Roman soldiers brought it over from. So definitely, but you can't say for sure because you just don't know. But like the tarot does include a lot of different systems. For example, it's based off of numerology, astrology, has a huge connection with crystals, Kabbalah, which is Jewish mysticism. So for me, the tarot is kind of a gypsy art because it collaborates so many different things.
So that's really interesting. And you said one thing there that I hadn't realized myself, and that was the association between the tarot and crystals.
Yeah, definitely. So with the tarot, you can definitely, the tarot is such a great tool. You can use it in so many different ways and with different modalities. You can even use the tarot with pendulums. So, for example, I love to give this example always. The Emperor card in the tarot is a very royal, regal fellow. And he's got a long beard in the picture usually, and he's associated with wisdom, a great empire. Nowadays, we don't really have those big empires. They would be more the transnational corporations, right? So for me, a crystal association that I like to use with that is the ruby. The ruby in particular because it was associated with the old empires, right? A lot of royalty had rubies in their crown, especially in the Middle East, in India, and even Egypt.
So how would you utilize that knowledge in a reading with somebody?
Yeah, definitely. Let's just say, they had to tap into their wisdom or they had to put in firm boundaries, which is the energy of the Emperor card, and of course it means many other things as well. Sometimes, you get a completely different message intuitively. So let's just say that card was coming up for someone quite a bit, and, they were having some issues there. They can use that crystal, the ruby, and, it can support them through whatever situation they might be going through.
Fabulous. Fabulous. Now, I also wanted to ask you, when did you set up the School of Gypsy Arts, and why did you do it?
Another great question, Lesley. So I started the School of Gypsy Arts on May 11, 2011, and, I didn't have any big plans for it. I set it up because I just wasn't finding a lot of spiritual hubs in my area where, people could go and advance their skills. So I really wanted to have a space and hold sacred space for people to develop their intuition and learn to meditate and just get to know themselves.
That's fantastic. And listeners, I've had a few experiences of Sharron's school, and I have to say it's fantastic. And I think one of the things that you've been really good at doing is developing a spiritual community around the School of Gypsy Arts. So can you talk a little bit to that idea about how you've built a community over the last few years, and what that process has been like, and what kind of feedback you've been getting from people, and what tips can you give other people listening who would want to develop a similar community in their location?
Yeah, so I'll tackle your first question with the School of Gypsy Arts. How did it, how did the community form? It actually started off with a tarot book club that we used to do bi-weekly or every 3 weeks, and we did it out of a bookstore in New West, and we would gather around a big old wooden table and talk about the tarot. And we used Mary Greer's book, 21 Ways to Read a Tarot Card. And, we just connected. And from there, actually, Carol, the owner of Reflections Books, one day said to me, "Sharron, why don't you teach a tarot course?" And I thought, So, I created a course outline and the content, and I put it up there, and it drew quite a bit of people. And from there, I just started to do other classes, and then I felt like I needed to bring other guests in that were specialists in their area. So I've had Leonard Howell come on, and he's a shamanic practitioner. Ethne come on, she does a lot of Wicca and spellcasting, and Crystal is a Wicca teacher. So just drawing in different teachers, right? So the school just started to flourish, and the feedback from people has been that they love coming. The classes are always affordable, and, they're just taught in a way where, you're not lectured, you're using your 6 senses too. So you get to explore your own spiritual side.
And that's perfect, isn't it? Because teaching intuitive abilities is not the same as teaching anything else. You can't really do it for your intellect. It has to be through direct experience. Wouldn't you agree with that?
Oh, yes, totally. And I think one of the things that people, one of the challenges that they have when they get into the spiritual realm is listening and trusting to their intuition, because there's lots of doubts, am I making this up? Is it my ego? So just holding space for people to explore that. And I think you had one other question, how people could build a similar community.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, so I would say, you can put an ad up on Craigslist or Meetup, or visit your local metaphysical store if you have one in your community, and just start with a topic. So if you're passionate about crystals, maybe hold a meeting about that. If you're passionate about pendulums, hold one about that.
Great advice. And of course, I should ask you about you and your personal story, because I know that you didn't start out doing this. You started out on a different track, didn't you? So tell us a little bit about your personal history and how you yourself came to be involved.
Yeah, so in the early 2000s, I went to SFU, and I had big dreams of becoming a scientist, and that didn't go quite well. It just wasn't for me. So I dropped out, and I managed a few retail places like Starbucks, and then that wasn't for me either. So I decided to go back to school, and I wanted to become a high school history and social studies and geography teacher. And, when I graduated, I realized the market was pretty soft for teaching, so I decided I was going to go into accounting. That didn't last. So I found myself a few years later teaching workshops on different spiritual subjects. So that's how I fell into this world.
Mm-hmm. So you got your wish to be a teacher, just in a different way than you'd envisioned at the beginning.
Yeah, and I think I prefer this one much more.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Now, of course, one of the things that you do is you have all sorts of different events that you put together. And you mentioned you have different teachers who come into the school and they do different classes. But you also have other types of events, don't you? Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so back in October 2012, I got asked to host a psychic fair. And I had never done one before, so I teamed up with Della Ratcliffe, and we ran them for about a year and a half, and I just love hosting them. And Lesley, you're one of the readers there.
That's right, I love coming to them.
Yeah, and we've got one coming up this weekend, the Mother Earth Psychic Fair. It's on May 9th and 10th, and it's just right above Reflections Books.
So, and if people want to find out a bit more information about that, is there somewhere online that they can go to?
Yeah, there is. Just type in the School of Gypsy Arts and it should come up, or you can try gypsyartevents.com.
Fantastic. And that's a really great event, folks. And Sharron does a lot of fabulous things to give back and thank the people that are coming. So you always have a really great prize draw, don't you?
Yeah, we've got a few door prizes, and they're up on the website. And we've also got a gift basket worth $300. And there's going to be free demos at 11 a.m. and 2:30 each day. And you're doing one too, aren't you, Lesley?
I guess I am. I guess I better check my calendar and figure out. I think I'm doing one on your intuition blueprint. Is that
it is,
right? Yes,
that's
yeah.
right.
Yes, yeah. Thank you for reminding me. That's brilliant.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we're going to go to a break in a moment, and after the break, we will be taking calls from listeners. So once again, I want to give you a number that you can call into. But of course, if you're feeling a bit shy, then you can send us an email as well. But and you can use a false name if you want, if you're a bit afraid of being recognised. So call us on 604-504-7441 extension 4142. So you've been listening to Unlocking Your Truth with Dr. Lesley. We are broadcasting live on 101.7 FM from the University of the Fraser Valley And you can also catch us on live streaming from our website on civl.ca. And of course, I'm live in the studio right now talking to Sharron Bassanti, who is the founder of the School of Gypsy Arts. And before we go to break, I'll maybe pick your brain over one more thing, because I noticed last time you had an event, you had a lady who was reading coffee grounds. So is the art of reading coffee grounds the same idea as reading tea leaves?
Ooh, really good question. Yeah, so you had asked me earlier about tea leaves, but I didn't quite get to them, so I'll chat a little bit about that. So tea leaf reading actually began in China, which a lot of the tea comes out of, and it migrated slowly over into Europe with the Dutch merchants and became very popular, especially during the Victorian era, where people would often have tea, and they didn't have tea bags at the time. So afterwards, they would read each other's teacups, and it wasn't, a woman's only thing. Men also participated in tea leaf readings. But then when the tea bag was invented in, I think it was 1903-ish, tea leaf reading faced a huge decline. But, that's a great question. It's not different reading coffee grinds versus tea leaves, because you are looking at the images that are formed by the material, whether it's tea or coffee, and also taking into account the white space. So I always describe tea leaf reading as looking at the clouds and seeing what images you get, and then connecting to source and spirit and just seeing what you get intuitively. Of course, with tea leaf reading and coffee grind reading, there's different traditions. So, it might be simple as, making a wish and then flipping over your teacup on the saucer. But with coffee grind reading, you put your thumb at the center and you say, that's the final truth.
Very interesting. And that's given me a really great idea for after the break, because last week I had a show planned on the paranormal and we didn't get to do the show. But a lady sent me in a photograph talking about interesting patterns. And it's a photograph that she took of her, it was a larger photograph, and it had her door in the background. And when she developed the photograph, there was an eerie image in the window pane, and she sent it to me. And seeing as we're sort of talking about, how you can use different ways of tuning in to your intuitive side, whether it's tarot cards, whether it's tea leaves, whether it's looking at the shapes in the clouds in the sky, I think that would be a really fun thing for us to look at. So after the break, I'm going to share this picture with Sharron. And some of you have already written in with your questions as well for her. So we'll go over those. But remember, call us, because we'd love to speak to you live. The more the merrier. It's so much fun when you call in. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Unlocking Your Truth with Dr. Lesley. My guest is Sharron Bassanti of the School of Gypsy Arts, and we're now into that part of the show where we are happy to take your calls. And you can call and join in the conversation about the Gypsy Arts if you have anything interesting to tell us about the history of the Gypsy Arts themselves. That would be a lot of fun for you to call in and do that. Or you can phone us up with a question about absolutely anything. You have two professional intuitive readers in the studio tonight, and so this is a great opportunity for you to phone up and have your questions answered. Now, I have a question for somebody about a tarot card reading they recently had. And this lady says, I had what she refers to as a Thunderbolt tarot card, and I think she means the Blasted Tower. And it showed up in her recent reading, and she says, I have no idea what area of my life it pertains to, and what and when will be the event that may happen to me to cause this. if indeed there is something coming up like this, and we'll just call this lady Ada. So Sharron, tell us a little bit about that tarot card. It's one of the ones that frightens people, isn't it?
It is. It's actually a castle, and it's built on a cliff. And there are in the traditional tarot, in the Rider-Waite deck, there is two people falling down, and they've got crowns on their head. And on top of the tower is a crown, and then there's a lightning bolt hitting that. And it's got a black background. So a lot of people perceive it as being, oh my God, uh-oh, I'm in for something big and it's not good, which isn't always true. So, in the tarot, I believe that there is no bad card. It just is. So, it can pertain to many things in her life. If it came up in a spread, I would recommend looking at the surrounding cards to get insight on what it could be related to. So, sometimes the Tower card is just about reevaluating the path that you're on because it's not built on solid foundation, and there might be a huge shakeup because of that, right? It's like building a house with, maybe on clay, and it's going to fall down if you don't build it on the proper soil.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and of course, what I always like to say to people as well is, remember you create your own reality. So it's really down to you what shows up in your future. You create your own reality through your thoughts and through your beliefs. And so sometimes a card showing up like that can just cause you to focus and pay attention to what's going on in your life, but it certainly doesn't have to be an augur of something terrible happening in the future, like Sharron says.
Yeah, and you bring up a really good point. I had a client come in, I think it was a few weeks ago, and she said, I received this reading from somebody else, and they told me that my trip was going to be not very good. And I said to her, they're not giving you a negative reading, they're just giving you a warning. So, when something does come up, you can handle it differently because you're prepared.
Mm-hmm. That's a really great way of looking at it. Well, I have another really interesting question from Peter. We'll call him Peter. And I have my own ideas about what this means, but I'd love to get your perspective on it too. So he says, just a metaphysical question. If you looked, and I'm sure he's talking about an experience he had, but he's sort of like talking about it in a sort of hypothetical way. If you looked up at a building and saw a triangle window like a pyramid with a reflection of sunlight bouncing off something like a ball and sitting on top of the triangle, and the building was under construction and one side was in the shade of this window shaped like a triangle. Well, basically what he's saying is he looked up at this building that was in construction and he saw this image that looked like a pyramid with a sphere on top of the pyramid and light reflecting off the sphere and the triangle. And then he looked at his watch and the time was 2:11. And he says, what does that mean? Is that reflecting some meaning back at me?
Yeah, that's a really great question. So, I would ask him a few exploratory questions to see if he can tap into his own intuition and find the meaning, right? So, I can give him some guidance. The pyramid, that's one of the most stable structures on this planet. Look at the pyramids, they're still around. And just having that sphere on top, I was visualizing it more as like a beautiful ball of light. So, and then 211, 11's a master number, and 2, there might be a union of something happening in his life. But, again, I would have to really sit down with him to figure it out.
Mm-hmm. Well, that was a great response, and actually was very similar to, I already responded to this chat by email, and very similar to what I said to him actually, because you're right, that structure of the pyramid is very stable and very solid. And when I tuned into him, what I basically tuned into was somebody who is highly intuitive themselves and actually has some great gifts of their own to be of service in the world. And so the pyramid was referring to the solid foundation that he'd built, and the light, the sphere, is the information that he has to bring in. And of course, we've had questions before about people looking at the clock and the time being 1:11 or 2:22 or 3:33. And there's a lot of people that believe that's a kind of a spiritual wake-up call. So to all the light workers out there, wake up, your time is here, time to step up to the plate. So, Peter, if you're listening in, now you've got two perspectives on that. So let me see what other questions. Now, I did say before the break, and if you could pass me that, Sharron, I want to describe that to the listeners. So this is a lady who sent me a photograph that she'd taken, and I'll describe it to you. So it's the window pane of her back door, and in it is a ghostly face, and it's a man's face, and he has sort of these two sunken eyes, and he's got a beard, and he appears to be holding one hand to his ear and another hand coming out of the picture towards us. Now, when she saw this, it completely freaked her out. So she thought that her house was perhaps haunted, and she wanted some help understanding what was going on. Now, I know that you also have some mediumship abilities, Sharron. Is it something that you feel comfortable taking a look at, this lady's, whether she has got a ghostly visitor in her house?
Yeah, I don't feel it's like a spirit that's lingering. It feels more like a guide to me, giving her a message. And it kind of reminds me of a story when I was young. I was about 10 years old, and I wanted to walk home. My parents were building our new house, and I insisted I wanted to go. So I was just about to leave, and I saw one of my guides there. At the time, I didn't know what it was, and it kind of reminds me of this image you've got here. So I ran back screaming, and I didn't walk home alone. So maybe something might have happened there. So when I look at this, it triggers me that this is a guide, and I feel like the guide is, telling her to pay attention, to listen. And that gesture of the hand out, maybe she might be giving too much to a few people in her life, and maybe it's time for her to receive.
Well, I know that she's a busy mum with young children, and that's always lots of giving.
Yeah, so to me it feels like it's a gentle guide around her, and I feel like she's going to get more messages from him. She's just got to be open-minded and not get scared by this. I know it is frightening to see a spirit, because I've been there, but it is one of the most beautiful things, because you know that there is another side.
Mm-hmm. Well, that is a brilliant response to this lady's question, I have to say. And I'm just going to take a little quick look myself as well, because that's normally what we do on the show. We'll sort of give a couple of different angles. I'm going to just take a look myself and see if I can tune into anything in particular about this as well. And as the regular listeners know, I just go into a very light trance so that I can just take a look. And I would just like to really validate what Sharron just said. There's absolutely nothing for this lady to be afraid of. That the spirit that is showing an image looks to be quite a high vibration entity, and yeah, I just validate what Sharron says. It looks like it's wanting to help her connect with her spiritual side and her intuitive side, and it's just showing whatever visible signals to her it can. And the funny thing is, I'm now looking at this picture, and I've just seen another image behind the outstretched hand, and the image is scales. And of course, that's also a symbol that has to do with balance. And the scales are right above the hand that he's holding out. And of course, one side is way down and the other side is up in the air. And so that's exactly right. a lot more giving than receiving at the moment.
Yeah, and Spirit always communicates with us through signs and symbols. So, I feel like her guide showed up for a reason. It wasn't accidental. It was to give her that message and just to tell her, don't be afraid and try to meditate and see if you can connect to this guide and get a name and build a relationship.
Fantastic. Well, seeing as we're talking about spirit guides, I actually have a second question. It's just a very simple one. So it's from somebody, the initials are PO, and I'll just show you their name, Sharron. And this person just wants to know, who is my spirit guide?
Yeah, that's a question I think we get quite a bit as intuitives, eh, Lesley?
Absolutely, yes, very common, one of the most common ones.
Yes, and for me, I always feel like there's a team that's working with you. And, you might have a few guides that stay with you throughout your whole life and others that just come in when you need them the most. And there's so many different types of spirit guides, too. Is that okay if we touch on that, Lesley?
Absolutely. Yes, please do. Yes, no. And actually, by the way, listeners, we'll touch on it now, but there's a previous show. So if you go back into the podcast, you'll find a whole show about spirit guides. But absolutely, give them some information about the different types. That would be brilliant.
Yeah, definitely. So for me, there's, a spirit guide could be a loved one that has passed over. So it might be, a maternal or paternal grandfather, grandmother. It could even go further back. It could be an ancestor from a few centuries back that just wants to connect with you. And then you also have spirit guides that, aren't a part of your family's lineage, but, they've been on Earth, they've had an earthly life. And then there's also professional guides. So let's just say I was a writer and I was facing a huge block. I might tap into a great writer from, history and connect with them and get them to help me with my own writing. And then, of course, we have our animal guides as well. So with the animal guides, I feel like they're a little bit more of a protective spirit, and they give their messages through their behavior, what they're doing. So if you see a bear standing, that has a meaning. If you see a bear swimming or a bird flying. So again, you can go to a reader to find out who your spirit guides are, but I would recommend that you go to a spirit guide meditation and find out for yourself who your guides are. Because once you start connecting to them, that's when the magic really starts to unfold.
Absolutely, and I completely agree with that too. I think Sharron and I are both on the same page here, that it's great for you to go and consult with someone else, but ultimately I think what people like Sharron and I would really like to see is to teach you how to do it yourself, to teach you how to connect yourself, because these abilities are not just things that only a special few people have. Every single human being has them. It's just unfortunate that mostly in our society and in our culture, they are not validated. So we're all sort of forced into our intellectual mind. But every single one of you listeners is capable of tuning into your intuitive gifts. And if you're capable of tuning into your intuitive gifts, then you're absolutely capable of communicating with your own spirit guides. All right, so I am going to take another break, and then after the break, we will be back and we will be taking more of your questions. Well, hello everyone, and welcome back to Unlocking Your Truth with Dr. Lesley. I think I forgot to give the email address out earlier in the show. So once again, it's info@drlesleyphillips.com. So I do have some additional questions here. And, we were just talking about how everyone has intuitive abilities. And I have a question from a lady here. And she says, what are my spiritual gifts? And I'll just pass the email on to you, Sharron, and then you can take a look at what the lady's name in. It might help you tune into her. So this lady wants to know, what are my intuitive gifts? And I think Sharron and I will both take a little look at that and see if we can give her some information. And maybe while Sharon's taking a look, I'm going to just tune in, just go into a very light trance and take a look at this lady. And you know, when I taking a look at you, what I am seeing is the area that lights up the strongest in response to this question is the top of your head. And in sort of spiritual language, that's called your seventh chakra or your crown chakra. And that is an energy center that relates to two intuitive abilities. One is called trance mediumship, which is simply the ability to bring spirit through the physical body, including your own. But also it relates to an ability called claircognizance or clear knowing. So tuning into your inner wisdom or your own higher wisdom. And so for you, and the initials of this lady are BG, so we'll just call you BG. For you, I'm seeing that your strongest intuitive ability, at least right now, is your knowingness, your ability to be still and simply know. And it's a fairly common experience that people have. So an example is, I don't know, you just get this knowing that you shouldn't go to work today, and then you find out there was an accident on the route on the way to work. That's a classic example. Now, the other thing I'll say to you, BG, is that I'm seeing that that's the one that you will recognize when we say it to you. Oh, yes, I have had experiences like that. But I'm also seeing that because you're not very grounded, and this is one of my soapbox subjects, so I'm always talking about grounding, that all of your energy and information is not really making it all the way through your system. And so I'm seeing that if you learn to ground and if you really focus your attention on your intuitive abilities, that there are a whole bunch of other ones that you would also be able to develop and tune into. And maybe Sharon's got some insight on what those other ones might be, or what did you see when you tuned into this lady?
Yes, one of the other intuitive abilities that I feel for her is clear empathy, where I feel that she may take on the emotions of other people around her, just feel things so clearly that she just knows what's happening with the other person. And I feel like she's just such an earth angel that I feel like people often go to her for advice and guidance. But one of the things that I want to suggest to BG is to get involved in the spiritual community and start discovering what her gifts are.
That's a really great suggestion. Now, I have a regular caller. So if you're listening, Lola, Lola calls in quite often. And she has a similar question every time. So it's great to have another reader on the show because maybe you can come up with a different perspective. But she wants to change her career. So she's been working on her own for a long time, running her own business, and she's decided to go back into the corporate world. And she's been searching for a job. And then, every step of the way she's been feeling blocked. And so, first of all, she was blocked at making the decision. And then she was blocked about getting interviews. Now she's getting interviews, but nobody wants, and apparently people are giving her great feedback, but nobody wants to commit. So she wants to know, well, what she says is my optimism blocking an energetic truth that I need to uncover? But again, basically she's sort of searching for, at this stage of my search, what's the block that I need to overcome?
Yeah, the first thing that came up for me for this gal is that I felt that contract work would be the best for her to get back into the corporate world. And it's interesting that you said that commitment part there, because, I do feel like she needs to look for contract work where it might be, 2 months, 4 months, 6 months, or whatever time frame it is. But in my heart of hearts, I feel like she's given up on being an entrepreneur. So, I feel like I feel like she needs to investigate what has drawn her back to the corporate world, because it feels like she left it for a reason to go pursue her passion and dreams.
Yes, you're right. And this lady Lola does have, I guess she was running into, as all entrepreneurs do, just having enough business flowing through her doors to keep things going was the original issue. But anyway, Lola, I hope that Sharron's perspective on your issue has given you an additional perspective. And because what you brought up in the last lady before her, you were talking about clairempathy or clairsentience. And I have a great question that relates to that from a lady called Ruth. Why is my daughter and I so connected? I feel her pain.
Yeah, to me it just feels that they probably live together too, I'm assuming.
I don't know.
Yeah, sometimes we're so close to people. When they go through things, we feel it. So let's just say, they get like a cut on their hand, you might feel that pain. So for me, it's about Ruth bringing in her energy, and same for her daughter, right? Because sometimes it can serve us, but also it can be detrimental in many ways that, it forms bonds of attachment, and you might not be able to move on in your life.
Yeah, it's actually quite a common question I get, because I seem to get lots of mums, especially with daughters and sons that are fairly grown up, and it's just such a common question. And all families do this. We share energy with one another. We get in each other's space is another way of saying it. And of course, the only energy that's meant to be in your space is your own energy. And the only life that you're responsible for is your own life. Even if it's your child, once they're old enough to look after themselves, their life is their responsibility. But what will happen is families get in each other's lives on an energetic basis. And when you have someone else's energy in your space, you are not just experiencing your own reality, you're experiencing their reality as well. So in this case, Ruth isn't only experiencing her reality, she's experiencing her daughter's reality, and she's feeling her daughter's pain. And as Sharron was explaining earlier, that this kind of issue is one of the major challenges for people who are empaths and who have clairsentience as one of their sort of main intuitive abilities. And because these people can be out in the middle of a supermarket and feeling the emotions of everybody in there. And so Sharron gave a great tip. Yes, pulling your energy in and learning how to release other people's energy from your space as well. And of course, one fabulous way to do that is grounding. And if you don't know how to ground, let me give you a quick tip. You just tune into an area near the base of your spine, and you create a flow of energy that goes from there all the way to the center of the earth. And it's sort of like provides a conduit for you releasing things that you don't want, amongst other things. So if you resonated with Ruth's question, if you recognize that in your own life, perhaps if you ground and focus on releasing some of the energy of some of the other people in your life, it will help you to feel a bit better. All right, so we've got time for one or two more questions. And, of course, we'd love you to phone in. And I'll just say the phone number one more time. It is 604-504-7441, extension 4142. And, of course, you can email us at info@drlesleyphillips.com. And if you've got a suggestion of a theme you'd like us to cover in the show, please email me also at info@drlesleyphillips.com. We've had a few requests lately, and that's great. I love it when you write in and say, please cover this. And actually, the paranormal one that I was going to do last week, I had 3 people write to me, so we probably will do a paranormal show. in the near future. So if you have had any paranormal experiences and you want to write to me about them, write to me at info@drlesleyphillips.com. Okay, what kind of question shall we do next? Here's a good one. So we'll call this lady Anne. I am in constant struggle with trust in friendships, family, and relationships. Somehow I need everything to be reciprocated so I don't get taken advantage of. How can I learn to trust and give freely without all these expectations?
Yeah, Lesley, when you were reading that question out, I just felt like there was trauma or a situation that had happened in her past that she hasn't healed from fully yet. So for me, it's not really about the people that she's interacting with. It's more about herself and connecting and healing that wound from the past.
Yeah, I think you're right about that, actually. And of course, sort of to take that as a general teaching, you know, we all do that. If you have a traumatic event happen to you in your past and you don't process it fully at the time, what we tend to do is we store those impressions, the beliefs that we set in place as a result of that in our energy field. And from then on forwards, you look at the world through that veil of stored energy. And actually the world looks at you through that veil of stored energy. And so, you know, Anne may have had way in her past something that terrible that happened that caused her to lay down a belief that I don't trust anyone in the world. And now everyone she looks at, she doesn't trust them. But the way to deal with it is to go back to that original core experience and release the energy that she's carrying from that original core experience. Great answer. Okay, I think we've got time perhaps for one more question. And, all right, here's a common one, another busy lady. So this lady, she says, am I on the right path? My career has several parts to it. I have an online clothing store. I offer Reiki and reflexology. I'm studying to be a yoga teacher and want to offer classes. I'm an angel card reader, and I'd love to expand on my intuitive gifts. I also facilitate desire map workshops. Will I be successful in all aspects of my business, or are there certain ones I should focus on more?
Yeah, that's a really great question. You know, I feel like she's exactly where she's meant to be. It feels like it's a time for learning for her and just absorbing all of the information like a sponge, you know, and I feel like she's going to carve out her own path, you know, so she's meant to take all these different modalities and create something unique, and it may not happen overnight. It may be in the next 5-10 years. So, you know, to me it feels like she's going to be creating something new, something different. It might just be even a new modality for healing.
Mm-hmm. That's a great insight. And actually, it feels right. It feels right. I mean, you know, I can see how those modalities could coalesce into something exciting. Mm-hmm. Yeah, brilliant. Well, we have got about 4 minutes left, Sharron. So I just want to thank you very much for being on tonight's show. And, of course, this has been Dr. Lesley Phillips on Unlocking Your Truth with Sharron Bassanti, who is the founder of the School of Gypsy Arts. And, Sharron, remind us again, if people want to get in touch with you, where can they go?
Yeah, so please check out my website. It's gypsyartevents.com. And there's also a free chakra kit on the website. So just click on the box and then you can access what the chakras are about. And
well, thank you so much for joining us this evening. I'll be here next week to take your calls. And in the meantime, write to me at info@drlesleyphillips.com with your questions and your ideas for what we should cover in the show.
Thank you for joining us. You've been listening to another Unlocking Your Truth podcast by Dr. Lesley Phillips. For more information, go to our website at dr lesleyphillips.com. That's drlesleyphillips.com, where you can ask questions or send her an email, and there's many free gifts on there for you as well. Come back again.